Welcome back to Nightstand Coffee. I'm Todd.
And I'm Jennifer.
And this is Season 2, Episode 14.
We are getting really close to the end of this season. We got
That's
one
right.
more after this.
One more episode, and then we'll take a short break and come back for Season 3.
Mm-hmm. This has gone by really fast.
It really has. And it's crazy to think that we're almost at the end of our second season.
Well, we started last March.
Wow.
So like we're
almost a year.
Almost a year. That's pretty wild too.
That is pretty crazy.
So I wanted to make sure that we talk about our email address. If you want to send us any messages, please do so.
Yeah. Any topics of conversation, anything you'd like us to discuss, ways that maybe the show's been helpful to you. We would love to hear all of those things. So it's nightstandcoffee@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm. We'd love to hear that.
Yeah, you can reach out to us there. And want to say thank you for being along for the ride. We're, like we said, we're almost at the end of our second season. We've been at this for almost a year now. And so many of you have talked to us about how the show has impacted you and how it's been helpful. And that is everything that we could ask for. We would love for it to reach as many people as it possibly could. We want to be helpful to as many people as we can. Help marriages to be healthy, help them to be Christ-honoring. And so if you know somebody that you think would enjoy the show, would benefit from some of the things that we've had to say, please share it with them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We would love that. Thank you.
And so today we want to talk a little bit about communicating with your kids about your spouse.
Right.
And about your kids having a relationship with your spouse.
Yes. And so how your children hear you speaking to and speaking about the other parent is really, really critical. And it can either really help to strengthen the bonds of that relationship, or it can erode them and break them down. And so we want to talk a little bit about that and what that kind of looks like, and why it's important and how we can do it better.
Well, and I think this applies to both married couples as well as divorced couples.
Absolutely.
Because honestly, the divorced couple may have the harder time with it.
Yes.
Because whenever there's been a break in the marriage and there's children involved, there is a temptation to try to get the child on your side.
Yeah.
Right? To try to say, hey, your dad's not paying child support, or your mom had an affair, or whatever it is. And so then you give the child too much information that they don't need to have. And then the child doesn't know what to do with that.
Right. I mean, most of the time, they're not even really old enough to process it.
True. Very true.
So then you're actually asking them to be able to deal with, to understand, and to process really adult things that they don't really have a context for. They don't really have the tools. And so then they end up feeling really torn. Right? Because they want to please the parent who's telling them these things.
Right.
And so then they push away the other parent, but then they feel guilt and they feel, I want to have a relationship, let's say the mom's talking about the dad. And so they want to make their mom happy. And so then they start, not spending as much time with their dad or whatever, but then they feel guilty because that's their dad. And that's, they want to be in relationship with him, and then they don't know what to do.
Well, and I think another component would be to consider that most children feel like the divorce is somehow their problem.
Yeah,
somehow
absolutely.
their fault, like that they created the problem. If they had behaved better, if they hadn't kept their room dirty, like they come up with these really asinine reasons, but they think it's somehow their fault that there's been a divorce that happens. And so then when you trash talk the parent that's not in their life, like let's say the child is in custody with the mom and the dad's not paying child support. And so they say, hey, your dad's not paying child support. Sorry, you can't play basketball because your dad hasn't paid his child support in 6 months and we don't have money to do that. Take it up with your dad if you want to play basketball.
Right.
So then that child internalizes that message and goes, not only did my dad leave, but he doesn't even care enough about me to pay the child support that he needs to pay to my mom. Yeah. And so then they internalize it even worse to go, what's so bad about
wrong with me
that my dad won't take care of these things? When it may not have anything to do, it shouldn't have anything to do with the child. It's usually some kind of financial decision. And should the parent pay child support? Absolutely. But I don't know that the best way to communicate that to your child is to trash talk the person that's not paying the child support.
Yeah.
And so I think you made a really good point about that push-pull between wanting to connect to the parent that's talking badly. Like they want to be on their side, and so they do everything they can to like please that parent. And sometimes they might even join in saying bad things about the opposite spouse, or they might be a tattletale, and so like they bring information to the spouse, like to the mom. If they're talking about the dad, say, hey, dad did this, just to kind of make it a way to join with that parent.
Yeah, because they want to bond.
They do. And so then maybe the mother gets too much information, and then like she starts running her mouth to her child. And so it just creates this bigger problem that doesn't need to happen. And so, yes, it definitely happens in divorce situations, but I think it can also happen in married situations.
Absolutely.
Where you end up including your child in things that they don't need to be included in.
Yeah. Well, even in a situation like, so let's say one of the parents travels a lot for work.
Yeah.
Then the parent who's at home often can begin to bond emotionally with the child and in unhealthy ways, right? Because the other spouse is not there for them to have those grown-up conversations with. They start to have those kind of grown-up conversations with their child. And so and part of that becomes, I hate that your dad travels so much, or I hate that your mom travels and is gone so much. I get, and they should find a different job. They should do this. They should do that, whatever. And then you're creating, again, that same kind of scenario. It's still in a married situation, but you're creating you're putting your child in the middle of a conflict that they don't need to be in, and forcing them in some ways to choose a side.
Right. And so the child doesn't have the developmental capacity to do that.
Right.
Right. Like they aren't supposed to be carrying the weight of the family when they're a teenager, when they're, 5 years old, 8 years old, 12 years old. That's not any time that they should be carrying that information. And so it's really not beneficial to your child to include them in that type of thing. Now, there may be a limited amount of information that you could share. Like if you are disappointed or frustrated that your mom is traveling all the time, you can say, I miss your mom. I miss her that she's not here.
Yeah.
I like it when your mom is here. That's an okay thing to say.
Absolutely.
But you don't have to trash talk she needs to get a new job. This job's so terrible, and whatever. You don't want to run it down, but it's okay to communicate the sentiment that you missed your mom being home.
Yeah, absolutely. But when it becomes the thing like, well, kind of like what you were saying, or that sometimes you'll hear things like, I told them they shouldn't have taken that job when it got offered to them, blah, 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 and then again, you're painting a negative picture of your spouse to your child, which can damage the relationship. And not only that, even the emotion that it comes from, the bitterness that maybe you're carrying, the anger that you have, when you're expressing that in those ways, it's probably not healthy anyway. You're already building a wall or deepening the divide that's growing between you and your spouse rather than trying to close it. And what we need to be doing is looking for ways to express how we're feeling in ways that draw us closer to our spouse, in ways that help to reconnect the connection that maybe has been broken. And when we talk about it in those ways, it's not helpful.
Well, and so if you're talking to your child about bills that need to get paid, or about worrying if you're going to have enough food to eat, right? Like if you are sharing really heavy parental burdens with your child, then that's really not ideal.
Well, and you're creating a sense of instability for your child.
Yeah.
Like
it's okay to say, hey, we don't have a lot of money right now, so no, I'm not going to spend it on these things, or you're going to have to wait till payday for me to do this. Like it's okay to put them off, but I don't think you need to tell them, listen, we're about to get evicted from our house, and so we're not going to have any food to eat. Like you don't want them to have to carry that load.
Yeah.
It's okay to put limits on the things you can spend money on, or say we're just not where we can do that. But they don't need to know that they could be homeless. That's really hard for a kid to carry that.
Right. Well, and then to take it a step further and kind of reconnect it to the conversation that we're having is that you certainly can't in those moments point the finger at the other spouse and tell your kids it's all their fault. If your dad would have just do this, or if your mom would have just done this, then those just aren't things that kids are prepared to process, and they don't understand how to deal with all of that. And I may miss this by a few years because it's been a while since I've read the research on it, but I think it's maybe not until age 25 that the frontal lobe actually fully develops, which is where your decision-making apparatuses are in your brain, and so children certainly aren't equipped to make those kinds of choices and decisions and to process those kinds of things at, 10, 12,
Right. And so it's important for you to consider that the child is 50% of each of you.
Absolutely.
And so then that's really...
literally half their chromosomes came from...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you're trash talking their other parent, that's really detrimental to them.
Yeah.
Because they can take that very personal to go, they're talking about part of me.
Part of me.
And then they're like, what's wrong with me? Well, if my dad's doing that, I need to make sure that I don't do that. Yeah. And then they really alienate themselves from the other parent.
Yeah. Well, so let's say that kid really looks like the dad, right? Or the mom, whatever, or has a lot of their personality traits, has taken a lot of, similar interests and similar, then that even connects that even more deeply to them. Like, well, I'm a lot like my dad. So if mom doesn't like dad, she doesn't like me. Well,
and I think sometimes those connections are made and you don't even know they're being made. So like, for instance, they trash talk the dad, like, and just say, he's so terrible. He's all these things. Right. And then in a different conversation, the mom says, you look like your dad. You remind me so much of him.
Like your dad.
You remind me so much of him. Yeah. Or you could say you're acting just like your dad. And so even though you're not complaining about your spouse in the same conversation, that child is making that connection on their own. Yeah. You're like, oh, mom has been saying all these things about dad, and now I remind her of dad equals I'm terrible.
Right.
And mom doesn't like me. She doesn't want me around because I'm similar to this person.
Yeah.
And so our words carry weight.
Absolutely.
And so it's very important that you consider what you're saying to your kid. Now, what about around your kid? Like what you're saying around your kid, I think is super important too.
Yeah, they're listening all the time. And people talk about that. Hey, your kids are always listening. They're always watching. And we know that it's true, but we forget sometimes.
Yeah.
And when we forget, then then we slip up. We say things we shouldn't. And they're there and they see it and they know and it lands. It finds a place.
And you would be surprised at how young they are when they start understanding the things that you're saying around them.
Yeah.
And even if you're talking in code, they know what you're saying.
Yeah.
So you need to be super careful about if you are needing to talk about hard things or not so great things about your spouse or your ex-spouse, make sure that you're doing it where your kids can't hear you.
Yeah. Find a private
that's
place.
Super important. And you don't even want them to be able to overhear you at all because they're going to take that in. They're going to take it. And so you really need to be mindful of where you're talking about it and how you're talking about it and to who.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they aren't taking that on.
Yeah. Part of some of the reading that we did to get ready for this episode, they were talking about maybe even just you keep a journal. So instead of venting, especially to your children, maybe keep a journal and write your feelings about those, things. And that could be super helpful.
True. And so you might want to write it in cursive because kids these days can't read cursive.
Yeah, they can't read cursive.
So if you can write cursive, go ahead and do that because then even if your child finds your journal, they can't read it. So that might be, something to keep in mind because you don't want them to find those things either, and to stumble upon them. But that's not a bad idea to get it off your chest instead of actually spewing it in front of your kids.
Yeah.
So do you ever think about what you're saying about me in front of the kids? Is that something you consider?
Yeah, I do. I try to be very careful, about not saying negative things. Even, there have been seasons, certainly, that you work a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And I try to, and I don't enjoy those seasons. I don't like that because I like you and I like you to be around. And so when you're not around, I can tend to get irritated about it.
Yeah.
And so, but I even try to be careful not to talk about that in front of the girls.
Yeah.
And because they'll say things because they want you to be home too because they love you, right? And so they'll say things about how you're working so much. And I'll say, well, your mom is helping people and she's, she'll be home soon. And, just try to, make sure that I keep those things positive and that I understand that they understand, that, that I'm on your team.
Well, and so I think it's important to point out too and discuss what happens if you agree with the complaint that your kid's making, right? So how do you validate their feelings, but also don't trash talk the spouse?
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be situation dependent, right?
Yeah.
So, but as a general rule, I think that, you just would validate their feelings, say, I understand why you feel that way, and you need to talk to your mom about that. That's how I would approach it.
Yeah.
And then I probably would circle back around and talk to you. Say, hey, one of our girls was talking to me about this, and have they talked to you? I think you should talk to them.
Well, so I think it's important to validate, which is to say, yeah, man, I definitely see what you're talking about. If you're going to use me working a lot as the example, it's like, yeah, you're right. Your mom does work a whole lot. And I miss her too when she's not home, because I like it when she's home. But I know that she's helping a lot of people, and that there's just sometimes that it takes more of her time than other times. And so this is one of those deals. And so we should talk to her. Let's let her know that you're not happy with these things. And I can go with you to help communicate that to her if you want me to do that. Right. And so acknowledging, and it's okay to agree. You just don't want to go, yeah, all she does is work.
Yeah, right.
She's never home. You're right.
Right.
I cooked all the food and you're right. And you start going off this list of things that you have to do because I'm not at home. Right. And so then, because that just escalates the situation.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's good to deny the kid their feelings, or to say, don't say that about your mom. You don't deny that, but you'd want to make sure that you can, that you validate how they're feeling, that you maybe help them to communicate it better. Because if they're doing it in a not great way, you want to help them to say it better.
Yeah.
And then help them to communicate it to the person they need to communicate it to.
Yeah. And I think too, make a point of trying to help your kids see the good things. And this goes for whether you're married or divorced. I think it may be even more important for divorced couples, because it'll do good for your heart too. To look for the good in either your spouse or your ex, in the other parent. Yeah. It'll do your heart good as well to look for those things and to speak them out loud. And it will go a long way toward encouraging the relationship between the other parent and your kids.
Well, and I think whenever your kid struggles to see the good things in their other parent, I think that even makes it more important for you to help them find the good things.
And I think some of that's natural. I think some of it happens just, especially during puberty and the teen years, boys tend to have conflict with their fathers during those years, because, well, there are lots of factors, right? They're growing into manhood and trying to assert themselves, and there's all the hormones and all that kind of stuff, and there's all those factors, right? That just as a general rule, young men can begin to have conflict with their dads during those seasons, and so it would be important for the mom to help try and grease the wheel, so to speak, and help the dad and the son, right, to continue to see positive things in each other. The same thing on the flip side goes for moms and daughters. Daughters and moms tend to have conflict during those seasons of life, and it's just part of the natural process of growing up. But it's really important for us as parents to make sure that we're keyed into that we're clued into that, and that we're doing everything that we can to continue to help that relationship to grow, to be healthy, and to weather that season, because on the other side of it are some really beautiful things.
Well, and I think it's important to consider as well that sometimes if we feel the same way that our kid is expressing, like we'll just keep using the work too much. Okay. So you might feel the temptation of you've been telling me that I've been working too much. And then one of our girls comes and says, Mom's working too much. And you're like, yeah, well, why don't you tell her that? And so then you kind of let your kid take on the point that you want made. You're like, well, maybe she'll listen.
They'll listen to the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then sometimes you're instigating a argument, or pushing your kid to go, well, go fight with your dad about that, or go fight with your mom about those things. Tell her how you feel. And so you don't want to do it in a way that's causing conflict, but it's a way to solve the problem.
Yeah. Or even if in that moment when they said, your mom's working, I feel like mom's working too much. And then my response is, yeah, I told her, I've told her, I don't know how many times I've told her you're working too much, Well, then, if they see the two of us in conflict, well, then they go, oh, well, yeah, Dad's been telling Mom that she's been working too much. No wonder they're fighting. It's all, and then they
align with you against me. Right. And so because you're agreeing about the problem, but you're not looking to solve it. You're just creating animosity in the home.
Yeah. Whereas if I kept that to myself, right, and just made it an issue between you and me, a discussion between you and me, and if I needed to talk to someone about it, I do it in private when our children aren't around, and I make sure that I'm doing it because I want help resolving the issue, not because I want someone to commiserate with.
Mm-hmm. I would also throw in here at this point that it would be important to find a same-sex person that you are confiding in.
Absolutely.
So women confide in women, men confide in men. Because if you confide in the opposite sex, then you have a chance of that becoming a relationship that it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're bonding emotionally with someone else, and so that can escalate into something else.
Yeah.
So we've had other episodes about that, but wanted to bring that up at this point, like to be mindful of who you're choosing to just discuss those things with.
Yeah. I mean, the caveat might be your mom or your sister, right? But outside of that, it should be someone of the same sex.
So as a man, you could talk to your mom or your sister.
Right. Or as a woman, you could talk to your dad or your brother.
Okay.
But,
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But someone that would be available as a dating partner. Want to avoid that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do think too, we want to talk about encouraging your child to spend time with the other parent.
Yeah.
So whether married or not, like I think that's important that you would encourage a relationship between.
They need them.
They do. To spend time together. And sometimes as a spouse, you may need to encourage your spouse to spend time. Like I may just say, hey, you should take take one of our girls to the grocery store with you. They haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah.
Or, take Claire hunting so she can fall asleep and you can take a picture of it and post it because that's what she does. But like encouraging that time together because sometimes that you need to know that the other parent supports that.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's something honestly that I feel like over the years we've done a pretty good job of.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know that I could think of a specific time, but there have been multitudes. All right. There have been a multitude of times where you've said, hey, I think one of our girls needs their daddy. Can you talk? They just need their daddy. You should talk to them about this. And vice versa. I'll go, hey, I think this is a mom conversation. I think they need their mom, and, and so I think it's the recognition that your kids need both of you. Mm-hmm. There are times that every boy just needs their dad and every girl just needs their dad. There are times that every boy needs their mom and every girl needs their mom, and so we need to recognize that. And so no matter what the state of your relationship with your spouse or your ex might be with the other parent, right? No matter what that may look like, your kids need them. Mm-hmm. And that needs to take precedent over your feelings and over what your relationship might look like in this season.
I would say a caveat to that, though, would be if there's abuse that's happened, like you don't want...
If they're a danger to your children,
Right, that's a whole different story and subject. But so I wouldn't encourage those things if they're like physically or sexually abusive to your child. Like you'd want to avoid that. But outside of that situation, I think it is important that you would encourage a relationship.
Absolutely.
They could spend time with their other parent.
Yeah, 100%.
You said that your dad was really good about that when you were growing up. That he was good about encouraging you to spend time with your mom.
Yeah. So my mom is the one who moved out when my parents got divorced, and she went and got a different place. And so we still lived at home with my dad. And so because that was our home, the one we'd lived in all of our lives, we felt very comfortable being there. But my parents had joint custody, and but there would be seasons where we maybe were staying at dad's, for weeks at a time and not going over to our mom's house. And my dad would actually just say, hey, she's still your mom. That's still your mama. You need to go and spend time with your mom, and I'm grateful that he did that. Cause my mom wanted us to be there, but would not have said it because she, there are a lot of reasons we don't need to get into on the show.
Yeah.
But but
well, I think she wanted to be the least disruptive to your situation, and
yeah.
but she would have loved to have you live with her.
Absolutely,
had that happened, and so
absolutely,
it definitely wasn't a reason of not having you live there.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't that my mom didn't want to be with us. No, absolutely not. That was never the case. But well, divorces are complicated, and there are all kinds of reasons that maybe my mom wouldn't have felt comfortable saying, "I want you to come out to my house," which sucks.
I feel comfortable saying with the conversations I've had with your mom that it really was about trying to be the least disruptive to your situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so she wanted you to stay at the house that you had been raised in. And so that would be the only reason I think that she would have not had you come live there.
Yeah, no.
But I think you'd said that your parents had done a good job of not trash talking each other to you guys as kids.
Yeah. I mean, certainly I knew there was conflict there, obviously, right? They fought. We talked about that a little bit before on the show, how that there was a lot of fighting in a house before they got divorced. But after they got divorced, they really did a good job. It's not that we didn't know there was tension there. We didn't know that. You pick up on those things, but they did not involve us in those conversations, and so.
Well, and you had said you probably didn't know really many details till you were already an adult.
Yeah.
And I think that's really how it should be. The kids don't need to know what happened.
Yeah. Now, I do think my older brother knew more.
Okay.
He was, 14 when that all happened. And I think he heard things at school. He heard, whatever. And so I think he was aware of more than me or my little brother were. Mm-hmm. But even still, it wasn't because of my parents.
Right. And so I think that's really important to consider that you're not the person that's telling the information to your kid.
Yeah.
Right. If they're bringing things to you, you do your best to discuss it. I don't think that opens a door, though, to tell them everything. Right. If they come in and say, hey, I heard this, what's going on, you can confirm or deny that. You can say, you know what? That's something I'll talk about with you when you're older. These are grown-up problems. And so when you're grown up, I'll be happy to tell you about that. But until then, this isn't something that you need to carry. I think a lot of times when divorce happens, or even in situations where there's an alienation with the parent, like you said earlier, maybe one of them works too much, or works out of town, or just they aren't communicating. There's a temptation then to bring one of your children into that relationship, into that role of confidant and friend, and you end up telling them more than they really, really need to know. And so I just see that happening a whole lot, because when divorce happens, or when your spouse is missing because they're working too much or they're just gone in some way, then you feel isolated. You don't feel like you have anybody to lean on. And so then what do you know? You have a kid that's asking, hey, what's going on, Mom? And so then you end up just spewing, and you just tell them everything that is going on, because you think, well, I'm just keeping it in the family. They can handle this. It's about their dad. It's about their mom. It's going to be okay. But then the problem is that now they're carrying this weight as a parent that they're not a parent. They aren't equipped to have that equal role with you. And so, but now they have all the information. And so then they feel like they have to carry it in the same way.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, that your kids need to stay kids. When they're adults, tell them whatever you want to tell them. But until they're grown up, then you need to kind of keep it.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that I would say tell them whatever you want to tell them.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'm just saying, maybe that feels dangerous to me.
Okay.
We've talked about this a little bit actually already. That no matter how old our girls get, I don't know that I would ever talk with them about you, at least in a negative light, right? Or that's not to say they couldn't handle it, and that's just my personal preference. But when I say tell them whatever you want to tell them, I don't know. Maybe that feels a little dangerous to me, but I don't know that I have a specific reason for that.
Yeah. So maybe tell them whatever you're comfortable telling them. Maybe you don't have to do your tell-all book, your memoir, where you tell everything, but you don't have to be as cautious, I guess, is what I'm trying to communicate. It's
yeah, and I think you're right there, but I do think it's still possible to poison the well even with an adult child, and you want to be careful of that.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So I think we as parents just have to be cognizant of the responsibility that we have, right? And like we need to make sure that we're not talking poorly about our spouse in front of our kids or where they can hear them, that we're not giving our kids too much responsibility or ownership of the problem if it's an adult problem.
Yeah.
But that you are encouraging your child to spend time with the other parent because they are half of that person.
Yeah.
And do your best not to trash talk them. Like you need to not say negative things about the other parent because they're half of them.
And even if they're asking, look, there are some kids that are going to want to know.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, that's their nature. That's their, you don't have to tell them.
Right. Well, and so you and I use the phrase, hey, this is a grown-up problem. You don't need to know about that.
Yeah.
And so we've got a couple grown-ups in our house. Coco's 18, Carly's 21. And so they're close to grown-ups. But I think there would still be things that I'd say, hey, this is a grown-up thing that you don't need to carry. Yeah. And so then we choose not to share those things with them because it's a problem between the two of you, two of us, right? And so we don't need to include them in that. And so use that phrase. This is a grown-up problem. You don't need to worry about this. When you're grown up, I will tell you. Not now.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will leave them alone, that they'll shut up at that point. If not, if they keep badgering you, it doesn't mean you have to give in.
Right.
You don't have to.
Yeah. I mean, I tell them like, that's between me and your mom.
Yeah.
You don't need to know about that.
Right. And so, taking the weight off of that.
Yep.
So anything else, any other closing thoughts you can think of about that?
Well, just again, I want to make sure with all of these things that we bring them back to the fact that these are things that we should be taking to the Lord. The scriptures tell us to cast all of our cares upon him because he cares for us. Right. And like, if I'm feeling some kind of way about you, I'm certainly not going to sway the Lord's heart. Right.
Sure.
He's going to love you no matter what. And I can take it all to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he can help me to process it and to know what to do and to find forgiveness if I need to, and to let go of, whatever is there that, or wisdom to know how to resolve the problem that may, all of those things. I think you have to take it to the Lord. And when we do that, then we're always better off than if we go, venting somewhere else.
Right. And so if someone doesn't know how to take it to the Lord, how would you suggest they do that? What does that look like?
I mean, it could look at a lot of different ways. It could be just sitting quietly and going, Lord, I don't know what to do with this. I'm just sit and wait and just say, Lord, I need you to speak to me. Mm-hmm. And the Lord will do that. And it may come in different ways, right? It could be that there'll just be a thought that comes into your mind. It could be that later on in the day, there will be a friend who says something to you and they don't even know what's going on, but they'll say something to you that triggers, the answer that you're looking for. It could be when you're reading the scriptures, you're reading the Bible, and you'll come across a passage that will give you some insight and some wisdom, either to what's going on in your heart or how you can handle the situation with your spouse. It could, sometimes, man, it might look like screaming at the top of your lungs in your private, in a private place, just airing it all out to the Lord, talking about how angry you are and how much it's, how frustrated you are. And he's got big shoulders,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you could also add writing it down.
Yeah.
You can put a note in your phone if you need to, or you can write it in a journal situation, and you can even say, Lord, this is how I'm feeling. And you just spit it out. And so take it to him with those ways and say, this, I don't know what to do here. And so getting it off your chest and communicating to God about that. I don't think there's a magic way to do that. And that's really what I was poking at for you. Is however you connect to God, do that and say, this is what I'm carrying. And so I know some people are uncomfortable with praying, but praying is just a conversation.
Yeah.
It's just talking. And so you don't necessarily have to do that where anyone can hear you if you don't want to. So you can do that privately. You can do that in your head. Like I said, you can do it on paper. You can do it in your car when you're by yourself, whatever that looks like. But it's communicating to God. And so taking those things to God is an excellent answer.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I have about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good conversation, a good place to start. Hey, listen, if you're struggling in this area, send us an email,
nightstandcoffee@gmail.com.
Yeah. We would love to help in any way that we can. And so until next time,
We'll see you later.